Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show that today gets you in the spirit of Christmas. Not with some crotchety old guy named Ebenezer or some young kid who really wants a BB gun. Nope, instead, we have a crotchety old guy named Roger Murtaugh, and instead of Ralphie's Red Ryder weapon, now we have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. Today on Versus, it's an accumulation of ass-kicking action all-timers as Lethal Weapon is taking on Die Hard. While each of these properties have 4 films, oh right, they made a 5th Die Hard, and it was not a good day at all. We're going to be focusing on the inaugural film in each franchise, although the sequels may factor in at some point. 1987's Lethal Weapon versus 1988's Die Hard. In one corner, you have Mel Gibson and Danny Glover buddying up to take down a whole host of Tinseltown baddies during the season of giving. In the other corner, it's Bruce Willis battling against a gaggle of terrorists at LA's newest skyscraper, Nakatomi Plaza. It's not easy for any film from the 1980s to still be relevant today, much less continue to be the gold standard in the action section at Blockbuster Video. There's always rumors that we might get a new entry in each franchise, and while both Lethal Weapon and Die Hard's origin stories share some DNA, only one movie will come out on top. Here's how we'll determine a winner. Round 1, box office. Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. Round 3, chemistry. Round 4, franchisability. And then we'll do a wildcard round that could involve which is the better Christmas movie. Well, Die Hard takes place at a Christmas party, but Lethal Weapon has a Christmas tree drug deal. And I will take this moment to remind everyone that yes, these both count as Christmas movies. Why? Because I watch them at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And the 4th of July. You know, they're really movies for all seasons, you see. It's the ultimate buddy cop film going tete-a-tete against cinema's favorite lone wolf. Let's get it on.
What do you say, Jack? Would you like a shot at the title? Don't mind if I do.
Round 1, box office. For all the hoopla about these two films celebrating the spirit of giving, neither was released anywhere close to December. Lethal Weapon was born first, arriving in theaters in March of 1987. Die Hard came a year later, in a month where only Rudolph and Frosty celebrate Christmas, July of 1988. Lethal Weapon's $65 million total domestic haul may not sound like much, but this was the 80s, kids. You could get into a movie with 2 nickels and a Bazooka Joe gum wrapper. When we adjust for inflation, the film did $152 million here in the United States. As far as the 1980s money is concerned, Lethal Weapon earned $120 million around the globe. Die Hard's numbers aren't much more gaudy, as it earned $82 million, which adjusted for inflation equals $181 million domestically, and reiterates a life lesson I first learned from Bazooka Joe. Don't do today what you can put off until tomorrow. Especially if that's making a movie, because it'll make so much more money in the future. Die Hard's international take was $139 million, but I can't imagine much of that came by way of Germany. For funsies, both films had sequels that outgrossed the originals, then the third movie in the franchise outdid the second one. Made in the days before you had to have some catchy sequel subtitle, Lethal Weapon 2 and Die Hard 2 both did over $200 million at the box office, then Lethal Weapon 3 and Die Hard with a Vengeance each performed to the tune of over $300 million. The fourth films also did very well, as Lethal Weapon 4 earned $285 million and Live Free or Die Hard did $382 million smackers. Yep, you heard it here first. Die Hard 4 is the highest grossing film in either franchise? Thanks, PG-13 rating. As a tiny lad with a penchant for whatchamacallit bars and no chance of a girlfriend, I remember these film franchises being a near constant force in the cinemas, and for what it's worth, when I was finally able to get into a theater to see one of their installments, I had a blast. In fact, 1995's Die Hard with a Vengeance was seen by 14-year-old Mark Ellis on opening day morning. My aunt took me, and we all liked it so much, I went back the same night with my parents to see it again. And to reiterate, no girlfriend whatsoever.
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
Mark was still girlfriendless in 1998 when I made my theatrical debut to see a Lethal Weapon. It was part 4, and I caught it opening night with my pal Jess and his family. Action movies. They may be full of bad words and blood and cigarettes, but they bring families together. What would become 2 action franchise tentpoles began as modest hits, and while I give many propers to Lethal Weapon for blazing the trail of a new kind of character-driven shoot-'em-up, Die Hard has the better numbers of the Cineplex and thus gets on the board first. It's 1-0 in favor of the Roy Rogers fan club.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee Yippee-ki-yay, mother.
Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. There's a very good reason as to why folks lined up in droves to see the sequels to both Lethal Weapon and Die Hard. The originals? They're really good. They're celebrated, beloved, and oft-quoted by audiences, but did all of that high praise start with the critics?
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
For Lethal Weapon, that would be a yes. The film that, according to the Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus, set the template for action films in the 80s and 90s, earned positive reviews, and wound up with an 80% on the Tomatometer. Maybe that's just the palate cleanser Die Hard needed, because it's even higher in the tomato patch, notching a 94%. That's good enough to barbecue certain parts of Lethal Weapon's anatomy on Hollywood Boulevard. So we have an A and a B, and curiously, both franchises remain fresh until their most recent outing. Lethal Weapon 4 is rotten, but a fresh adjacent 53%, and A Bad Day to Make a Die Hard Movie is rotten with no redeeming value whatsoever at 15%. Jeez, is it really that bad? You know what, I can't right now. It's gonna make me sad. Let's move on. So let's turn it over to you, the audience score voters. You let your voices be heard about these two iconic actioners, and I think it's safe to say you're fans. Lethal Weapon is at 86% here, and Die Hard ties its Tomatometer score with another 94%. The good news for Lethal Weapon is that no film in its lineage is rotten with the audience. The lowest point came in 1992 when Lethal Weapon 3 earned a 61%. Fun fact, I tried to sneak into that movie twice on 2 different occasions. I got caught both times and sent packing back into the theater for the film that I did pay to see, Beethoven. Or maybe it was Beethoven's second. I just remember a lot of dog slobber and Charles Grodin yelling, but I digress. Die Hard was a perfectly fresh franchise with the audience until McClane and Son teamed up to defeat a carrot-chomping bad guy. I really didn't make any of that up. And the 5th film in the canon earned a team low 40%, for which it should be thankful it wasn't worse. Because it really should have been. Joel Silver produced both the original Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, and with the directing power of a Richard Donner for Weapon and John McTiernan for Hard, that sounded weird, it's no surprise that both movies fared well with both critics and audiences. But once again, it's Die Hard that sports the better numbers on each metric, and all of a sudden, Lethal Weapon's back is against the wall. It's down 2-0 as Die Hard takes this round.
Welcome to the party, pal!
But if we know anything about Lethal Weapon, it's that when it's pressed up against the wall, that's usually when nutcase Martin Riggs throws his shoulder into it to pop it back into place. Steve Young once did the same thing in a playoff game. All right, buddy cop legends, it's do or die. Hard. Round 3, chemistry. Now, the title of this round may seem like it's heavily weighted towards Riggs and Murtaugh, our protagonist cops from Lethal Weapon. And after all, they're the best police brohams this side of Beverly Hills Cop. Ooh, I like that for a future episode of Versus. And they're playing off one another's unique personalities. That's a major reason why. But don't sleep on Die Hard. McClane may not have a full-fledged partner he was teaming up with on the 30th floor of the Nakatomi Plaza, or sometimes the 31st floor, but he did have a ton of help. Not only was Sergeant Al Powell a clutch arrival midway through Die Hard, he also provided a makeshift therapist for McClane when he just needed someone to talk to. If ever there was a time to go to therapy, it would be while you're picking bits of glass out of your bare feet. Reginald VelJohnson's LAPD officer on the wrong patrol at the right time does it all. He's comic relief, compassionate, has his own troubling history with violence, and hits the most clutch shot of the entire movie. He's so good that fans are still awaiting the greatest shared universe stunt of them all, Die Hard and Family Matters.
Who are you then?
Just a fly in the ointment, Hans. The monkey in the wrench. A pain in the ass.
VelJohnson plays a cop in both the hit movie and the famous TGIF sitcom, and nothing would be better than to see John McClane seated next to Steve Urkel at the Winslow family Christmas dinner. And in Die Hard with a Vengeance, McClane is paired up with Harlem shop owner Zeus, played by Samuel L. Jackson. The two Pulp Fiction cast members were great together in a movie that many considered to be a nod, or maybe inspired by, or maybe written for a Lethal Weapon. But Die Hard 3 isn't the only flick that might owe a debt of gratitude to Riggs and Murtaugh. Everything from 21 Jump Street to Bad Boys, they all took a cue from Lethal Weapon's formula. But no one's ever done it better than the OGs. Martin Riggs, a loose cannon whose suicidal tendencies make him both a danger to heroes and villains. He's perfectly balanced by family man Roger Murtaugh, who is rapidly getting too old for this stuff. Another fun fact, Danny Glover was only 40 years old when he first played Roger. Really? I'm older than Murtaugh. Well, okay, he put in another good decade after that, and there's always a new crop of rumors that he might return again, so I guess I have some time left. Time is a double-edged sword for Mel Gibson's Riggs, as each coming day brings with it the question of whether he wants to stay alive. In one powerhouse scene, he indicates that he has his way of going out ready whenevs, and more often than not, the only thing keeping him from doing that is the job. A job that is tremendously enhanced not just by Murtaugh, but Roger's family as well. Later in the franchise, Riggs does settle down and finds the love of his life in Rene Russo's Lorna Cole, but it was first Murtaugh who found the key to Riggs' heart and helped keep him alive in the process. If the Murtaugh family unit was there for Riggs, then who else besides Al Powell was there for John McClane? Well, clearly not the FBI or the principal from the Breakfast Club. Holly Gennaro, formerly known as Mrs. McClane, only gets a brief few minutes that end in a war of words before it's terrorist o'clock at Nakatomi. But it's also fair to say that Holly is a big reason why John is fighting so hard through physical and mental anguish. And let's not forget about Argyle. The limo driver who picked Lieutenant McClane up from LAX gets John loose and even cracks a few smiles as he's deep diving into what went wrong with the separated husband and Lady McClane. It's important exposition to have because we see that Johnny, he's just like the rest of us. He has the same issues and problems as we all do, and he's forever cemented as a regular guy. Riggs and Murtaugh both have their own set of internal demons to battle as well. Roger wants to be there for his family as a steady provider and has grown wary of putting his life on the line every day. He needs a partner he can trust, if for no other reason just to increase his odds of making it home safe each night. And Martin, well, he needs structure. A trailer on the beach with a beer-fetching dog may be some of ours ideal existence, but Riggs uses it as a secluded way to stay stuck in his own tragic past. And it's not until he gets some quality bonding time with Murtaugh, that may involve some bad guy toe tags, that he starts to see the possibility of a second act for his life. 1988 Bruce Willis would have chemistry with just about anyone, even a brief moment with Bill Clay, who should be on TV with that accent, because it was actually evil terrorist head cheese Hans Gruber. And while it was a life-saving shot fired by none other than Al Powell from way downtown that saved lives, including both McClanes, it was Riggs and Murtaugh who saved each other's sanity, and then later lives, by becoming partners. These two fellows whose back-to-back look on the poster sold their movies for over a decade finally get on the board with a win here in round 3, and Die Hard's lead has been sliced in half. It's 2-1.
You ever met anybody you didn't kill?
Well, I haven't killed you yet.
Round 4, franchise ability. All right, folks, now it's the time that Rennie Harlan, Joe Pesci, Jeremy Irons, and Chris Rock have been waiting for. Let's get some sequels into the ballgame. But don't head right back to the bench, you originals. This round is still largely dependent upon your broad shoulders, which means Riggs is probably going to have to pop his back in place. I actually tried that once at home, and it's better left in movies. No explanation needed. Sure, 1987's LW and 1988's DH. Man, am I really that lazy? Society went downhill ever since we changed Kentucky Fried Chicken to KFC. Anyway, they're both still in the pop culture lexicon for a reason. They're great movies. The action, the excitement, the jokes all hold up rather well, and they're both some of the best holiday flicks you'd ever want. But they also each spawned monstrously successful sequels, TV shows, and a countless number of knockoffs. Yet for the next decade, no copycat flick could match the entertainment value of what these two properties kept churning out. So which movie set does make for the best franchise? Which sequel would we want to see next? And did I, Mark Ellis, star of stage and screen, actually invent the term franchisability? To me, the first 3 Die Hard movies are unassailable, even the not as highly regarded Die Hard 2. Remember, kids, that's the movie where we get snow, a really cool fire jumping onto a plane climax, and the best edited for TV moment in film history. Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon! That's actually in the TV edit. They didn't want to say MFer, and I get that, but no one in the movie's named Mr. Falcon. It's Colonel Stewart who hijacks airports when he's not doing naked karate. Let's ask another character played by William Sadler if they think that's the worst TV dub in cinema history.
Damn right!
I rest my case. The Lethal Weapon sequels, cleverly named 2, 3, and 4, stayed with the primary ingredients that made the first one so successful, Riggs being somewhat of a loose cannon and Murtaugh counting down the days until retirement. But each subsequent film added a new spice into the recipe. More Joe Pesci's always a welcome comedic supplement, and getting to spend more time with the Murtaughs and a possible Mrs. Riggs and Rene Russo helps ground the action. The villains kept getting more sinister as well, and it was Jet Li in Lethal Weapon 4 that added a menacing presence on par with Gary Busey's Mr. Joshua. Die Hard's initial trilogy probably takes down the first 3 Lethal Weapons for me, primarily on the strength of the villains. Hans Gruber is an all-time baddie, and I'm just now being told in my ear that was Alan Rickman's first movie? What? And major props to classically trained ballet enthusiast Alexander Godunov for being the scariest force in Nakatomi Plaza. Him and Hans had pretty good chemistry, by the way. But seeing Jeremy Irons as Simon Peter, familiar last name, was so cool. He's devilishly wicked and has a maniacal sense of timing. You see his performance in Die Hard with a Vengeance, and you just think, someone had fun. But when we look at the mythology as a whole, Lethal Weapon never missed a beat. Die Hard kept swinging for the fences and started striking out with Live Free or Die Hard. Look, I can get over watering down some of the violence and gore and Mr. Falconisms to earn a PG-13 rating, but nothing really works in that flick or a good day to whatever. Maybe it's the kids as adults and now helping aspect, or the premise of this one guy still having to save the day, or maybe we just need Bruce Willis with hair to make a good John McClane. Die Hard's easy to copy, but as the franchise itself grew, so too did our weariness at this one dude constantly having to be increasingly a superhero in these ridiculous situations. That works fine for the MCU. For a dude who's at heart just an ordinary street cop from New York, not so much. Kids from Brooklyn can grow up to be Captain America. Adult police officers from one of the 5 boroughs, eventually they need to pull a Murtaugh, just retire and get that gold watch. So even as I'd claim Lethal Weapon maintained its greatness for longer, oddly, I have more hope in a Die Hard sequel than a Lethal Weapon edition. But it has to be done right. And there was a script treatment offered by writer Ben Troublecook that set a really cool premise. John McClane goes to Japan to be honored for his Nakatomi heroics on the 35th anniversary of saving it. But all hell breaks loose, and he's got to get after it one more time. I hope he's got a tank top on under that tuxedo. Instead, some of the powers that be wanted to make a prequel to Die Hard, and Len Wiseman was tapped to direct. So let me get this straight. We love a movie about a cop who's never been in a situation like he was in the first Die Hard, so we'll tell his backstory of catching purse snatchers? Come on, movie people. A new report has indicated that Mel Gibson could direct a 5th Lethal Weapon, stepping in for the late, great Richard Donner. Look, the dude has been a great filmmaker. Braveheart, Hacksaw Ridge, others. But let's just say he's not as universally beloved as the guy on the What Women Want poster. As far as the products we've already had, Lethal Weapon has been the more consistent franchise, and the TV show was surprisingly entertaining, even though it was a different Riggs and Murtaugh. We don't have a Die Hard TV show with a different John McClane for a reason. The format has been ripped off countless times on the big screen already. Under Siege, I love it, but it's a Die Hard ripoff. Sudden Death, I love Van Damme playing goalie for the Blackhawks, but it's a Die Hard ripoff. Speed, I love it, but that bus is just Nakatomi Plaza on wheels. Lethal Weapon and Die Hard both have had their premises borrowed thousands of times in entertainment since their initial release. I dare say Die Hard is the more shamelessly copied property, but as a film series itself, Lethal Weapon had more potential for new adventures with its original cast, even if that staying power has since been compromised. Don't drink and drive, kids, especially if you're leaving Duke's Restaurant in Malibu. Lethal Weapon gets the win in round 4, and all of a sudden we got a tied ball game, 2-2. And now it's time for the Wildcard Round. Iconic moments.
Why you gotta make things so complicated?
Shh. Here. Thanks. I don't make things complicated. That's just the way things get all by themselves.
And now it's the time we've all been waiting for. The best and baddest and most bodacious scenes, sequences, and sarcastic slides from the 2 films that did all of those things better than anyone else. Box office means you get sequels. The Tomatometer means those sequels could actually be good, and the legacy of these 2 properties proves that every Lethal Weapon or Die Hard film matters somewhat, even the ones that take place in Russia. Because why? That's the best we could have done with Die Hard 5. But here and now, the deciding round in today's hotly contested matchup will be won by that first film that gave us the most lasting memories. Because I'm a softie at heart, I will allow one iconic moment from another film in each canon to weigh in, and I got some good ones. But first, if you would do the honors, Mr. J. As unhinged as Martin Riggs might be in that first Lethal Weapon classic, he can't match the out-of-his-mind bad guy, Mr. Joshua. How crazy is that dude? Well, he's doing things on camera that not even the actor playing him would attempt. Oh, and did I mention that said actor is Gary effing Busey? The dude lights his hand on fire, doesn't bat an eye. We all had a grandparent whose fingers were resistant to sewing needles, but a flaming appendage? That's next level stuff. Die Hard's Carl counters with some bat guano thinking of his own. Witness his chainsaw to the Nakatomi wiring as his poor brother is rushing to finish rigging it. It was a well-planned operation, and luckily that meticulous timing counted for an occasional showboaty moment from the Scottie Pippen to Hans Gruber's Michael Jordan. As for our protagonist, Riggs and Murtaugh chewing it up at Roger's family dinner table is funny and heartwarming, but for my money, the most memorable sequence in Lethal Weapon is Riggs explaining exactly the hell that he goes through on a daily basis. He wakes up and finds a reason not to off himself, and he's thought this plan out so much, he has a hollow-tipped bullet for the occasion. He claims it's the job that keeps him going, but the sweetness of this partnership indicates that over time, it's not the gig, it's his comrade Roger that he's living for. And I'd like to thank the dog, too. That pooch fetches alcohol. That is a good boy. Give him a treat. John McClane also has a deep emotional scene when he's calming down from that initial adrenaline rush of downing terrorists. He's doubting whether he's going to make it out of this alive. He's opening his heart over the walkie-talkie to Al Pal as his feet are pouring out blood, and it humanizes John in such a way that action stars had not been portrayed up to that point. Both Lethal Weapon and Die Hard showed us that action stars don't have to win weightlifting championships and deliver quippy one-liners to win the day. They can be in touch with their feelings, too. That isn't to say that John McClane is short on witty comments. A few of my favorites would be, "Welcome to the party, pal," and "No effing S, lady, do I sound like I'm ordering a pizza?" The guy's a laugh a minute. Unfortunately, he has a penchant for killing terrorists with feet smaller than his sister. Roger Murtaugh plays basically John McClane, maybe with a dozen more years on him. He's still up for action, but he wears his age with the classic lines like, "I'm too old for this duty." You see, that was a better overdub than the Mr. Falcon thing. Martin Riggs is the best shot in either film by a mile, and that's about the distance with which he hits one of the most clutch long-range jumpers in cinematic history. But I also love the scene where he's dealing with a more run-of-the-mill sniper, and he doesn't bat an eye. It's beautiful stuff. And that fight scene between Mel and Gary still holds up. It incorporated jiu-jitsu moves in a realistic way long before the UFC was even a twinkle in Dana White's eye. But if Lethal Weapon has some great action moments, Die Hard plays out like, dare I utter the phrase I've utilized before in Versus, one long iconic moment. It could be McClane crawling through the air vents, or his fight with Carl, or just him making fists with his toes. And it's his nemesis Hans, who's just as powerful, from his show of force at the expense of Mr. Takagi, to his purposely ridiculous demands, to the FBI playing right into his hands, to the shoot the glass moment, or even blowing up the roof. Hey, you want iconic? I give you possibly the best scene in action film history. Lethal Weapon has a good route-jumping moment as well, and we get to see how divergent our two lead personalities really are when push comes to shove. But there's never been anything more resourceful, desperate, or heroic than John McClane tying a fire hose to his waist and leaping off the roof just as it blows up. The look still holds up to this day, and it's one of my favorite jumps to do off a high dive. Die Hard is closing in on a W, but here comes Lethal Weapon 4 into the ring. I told you I can take a moment from a sequel, and for Lethal Weapon, it's numero quattro. It's not the opening sequence when we get a taste of Fire in the Hole from the Gary Cherone era of Van Halen. It's later, when we're in high-speed pursuit on a major LA thoroughfare. There's a house being moved in the fray, and Riggs finds himself concrete surfing atop an upside-down table. It's a cool stunt, but what sells me on it is when he breaks a leg off of it, flings it into the windshield of one of his antagonists. I love good improv, and that is Whose Line Is It Anyway worthy. Die Hard needs to match that for the victory, so we turn to Die Hard with a Vengeance. There's tons of great action in here too, but I'm putting all my chips into the center of the table for the quiet chat with some agency bigwigs in a van. This is the moment when audiences realize why John McClane is the one in this predicament. Unlike the bad luck of every other Die Hard entry, these sideways events are happening specifically to him for a reason. Does the name Gruber mean anything to you? Peter Krieg was born Simon Peter Gruber. He's Hans Gruber's brother! What? It's a great twist of fate, and it even engages us more in this game of cat and mouse. Or Simon says, that we're thrust into. Most importantly for our purposes, it gives Die Hard the win here in a hard-fought contest that had me wondering if I'm too old for this you-know-what. To quote Doc Holliday in Tombstone, "Not me, I'm in my prime." He died like 2 days later. Die Hard wins the round, and thus, the match. But it seems these days, all anyone really cares about is whether these can be considered Christmas classics. The answer is yes! I'm on TV, or at least the internet, and I will definitely say once and for all that they are in the spirit of the season of giving. One could even surmise that Roger Murtaugh is like the guardian angel Clarence to Martin Riggs' George Bailey. Action shoot-em-ups. Gather the family around the tree and enjoy loads of evil terrorists being brutally murdered. God bless us, everyone. Die Hard edged out a win today, but that's just my opinion. Now I turn it over to you, dear viewer. Vote with your take and hit me up at Mark Ellis Live with your decision. And be sure to check back here at Rotten Tomatoes for tons of fun lists and info about action movies, Christmas flicks, and everything in between. Thanks for watching this installment of Versus. I'm Mr. Falcon saying yippee-ki-yay, and to all, a good night.